So good afternoon to everyone who is tuning in from the North American side of the world and South American too. And good evening to those who are joining us in Europe, as Richard and Brother Harley are there enjoying. As you can see at Richard's window, there's dark already, so it's getting ready for bed pretty soon. It's a wonderful opportunity for us as we continue journey through the general chapter, which will be almost 2 weeks right now. And in the process, the general chapter is the gatherings of the oblates, delegates from all over the world. And certainly it's the biggest task for the general chapter is the election of Superior General and the council, which will be happening pretty soon, my understanding next week or over the next weekend. But before we go there, I'm really grateful, Richard and Harley, that you had this opportunity and takes a few minutes for us on this side of the Atlantic to share with your experience, a little update on the chapter, how's it going there. And so you're into 2 weeks of the chapter now. I mean, I know that those first couple of weeks was lots of excitement, getting to know the oblates that you've met before and listening to all the reports, everything. Like, tell us, what is the spirit at the chapter? Like, how would you describe the spirit after those 2 weeks of gatherings, of meetings?
Well, I would say that the spirit is wonderful. Like you can actually feel the community sense building as we get to know each other, as we spend time together. Like we spend a fair bit of time in small groups. We're not always in the plenary,
Imeanza kupiga.
and and in the small groups that I'm in, the small group that I'm in, we're literally from all over the world. And I've known a couple of the men before, but most of them are strangers. There are 10 of us. I knew
Mhm.
two people there before, so the other seven I've just met here. And yeah, it's a real family feeling, really.
It's amazing how we can get that feeling that quite often our oblate ministry is happening within the province or even within the region. But when you go to the chapter, you have that big worldwide sense that belong, as you said, Richard, belonging to one family. So welcome, Fidel. We are glad that you were able to join us as well. We're just reflecting and trying to share like what is the spirit of the chapter when you after those 2 weeks of meetings and gathering. What's your personal take? What's your personal reading of the spirit of the chapter?
Good evening. Thank you very much. Yeah, so far so good. It has been intense with reports from different regions, reports from the Superior General and other services of the General Administration, like the JPIC, and then other reports. And then we've been reacting to those reports and reflecting in groups. General, the spirit is good. I see this very fraternal spirit of working together, coming together, sharing meals together, and then also socials. People are happy. There is that joy of being together here, and then
Mm.
also the commitment to work together. I see that people are really very, very much involved with a lot of energy already at the very beginning.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And Harley, how was your experience?
Well, I'm thinking of the tabloid reports on the royal family. It would probably draw in more viewers if I could tell you I was going to give you an exclusive about the infighting and gossip and altercations that were happening, but nothing like that. As Richard and Fidel are saying, it's just a great family atmosphere. I mean, the theme of the chapter is pilgrims of hope and communion. And there's such a deep sense of communion here amongst the delegates. It really is something. It doesn't matter what country, what continent you come from, what language you're speaking. We get together, and there's just that immediate electric bond of we are oblates. We belong
Mhm.
to one family. It's absolutely incredible. I don't know what other group one could belong to where you would have that same immediate connection.
It's amazing, truly, to witness that experience of feeling an oblate wherever you are in the world, belonging to that one family. Talking about the oblate family, when we spoke last time, last Friday, we had Sandy with us. She was just preparing for giving the presentation on Saturday, and as she mentioned, that was a little bit different experience of being at the chapter as the Oblate Associates for the very first time, participating in the meetings in person, at meals and gatherings for first week. And now the Oblate Associates are gone to their own respected lives, and chapter continues. But what was your expression, or maybe the sense of the community in the chapter itself? Like how that report was received by the Oblate Associates was, because that happened after our conversation last week. And like, what was the response, how that was received?
Well, my sense is that the lay associates have had a significant impact on the course of the general chapter. Their presentation was talked about, and it continues to be talked about in the small groups. There's constant reference to how delegates were just deeply moved by their joyful, enthusiastic taking up of the charism of Saint Eugene. That's been what I have experienced anyway.
Amazing. It's actually like for Lacombe province, it's kind of Oblate Associates have been with us for a long time, but I'm sure that the experience of the Oblates from other parts of the world, there's a little bit different ways of associating with the Oblates, and that's what curious for me. Like that was how that was received. Like for us as the Lacombe, it's kind of nothing new in the sense that we've been with the associates for so long, we've worked with them and shared the mission and ministry. But like, did you hear anything from the other delegates that they maybe never experienced that kind of relationship between the vowed oblates and lay associates?
I haven't heard that so much. There certainly was a lot of enthusiasm around the associates and their presentation. Also, their presence among us.
Mm-hmm.
They were certainly welcomed into the community, and in the discussion groups, and as we listen, even sometimes in the plenary, it keeps coming back to our relationship with the associates and with the laity, and um, the whole question of synodality keeps coming up as well.
Mm-hmm.
That somehow within the congregation, but also in our relationships outside the congregation, that we're called to a move, to continue to develop that synodal way. Um, so I think, whether people have had relationships with associates or not, uh, they certainly have been welcomed into the fold.
It seems like the synodality is marking truly the life of the church in a big way. Well, the Oblates, we went through it as the province through our process forward together, listening for the Spirit. And it seems like this is a life of the church these days. And your experience that you have that in the chapter. Fidel, could you share with us a little bit for those who are watching? Like we know the Oblate Associates present in Lacombe province in Canada per se, but I know that there are some developments as well in Kenya with the Oblates associations. Can you share with a little what's happening there, and are they building up, or is there any connection with the Oblate associates in Canada at the same time?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, just to appreciate the presence of the lay associate here in the chapter the first week. It was really a significant presence and also contribution. And then we saw
Mm-hmm.
a lot of energy sharing the reports. It was really touching, and then we appreciate it. And then seeing also how they are really very much passionate about oblate life, oblate charism, and then it's like really now they know their place, and then they know also their role, in this oblate family. So from Kenya, we are seeing also growth, in terms of those joining, those who are interested in
Mm-hmm.
lay associate, group. So far we have a good number, of them, but also they are working with us. Like at Kionyo, for example, our mission there where we started, we find that they have regular meetings, and then they're the one managing like our small farm, our small tea farm, managing it, and then trying to bring a small income that's supporting us. And then when we
Mhm.
have events like ordinations or when we celebrate our oblet feast, they always present and active, and then celebrating ifas and then also assisting where there is need. So it's a great experience so far in Kenya.
It's wonderful. It's growing, so it's becoming a part of the oblate life as well. That building that big Macedonian family, as we call it. I have a little maybe question out of curiosity and a little bit behind the scenes curiosity at the chapter. I watched a number of pictures that were posted by the communication team from the chapter about the Sundays. Like Sunday was your day off, and I noticed that the oblates were going to different places and the different pictures. Share with us, what did you do last Sunday, or what excursion did you take on, and how did it go? Or maybe you stay at bed all day because you were so tired after a whole week.
Yeah, last Sunday it was interesting. We
Oh,
Oh, Fidel, I think, disconnected. I'm sure he will be
Yeah.
back. So, Richard or Harley, what did you do?
Go ahead,
well,
Harley.
we hopped on the bus that went off to where Saint Francis wrote his rule,
Oh, wow.
and now Richard will be able to supply the names. Do you recall the places, Richard? Uh, Great Joe.
Um, yeah, I can't remember the Great Show and Colonnade. Can't remember the name for the word for dog in Italian, but they're just they're in the valley between Rome and Assisi, like where we were, where Francis had the first creche in the cave. Assisi is just on the other side of that mountain,
Mhm.
and so now, in the system of caves, there was a community that lived there. So there's a little chapel with the choir stalls and everything. This is back from the 13th century. And then above that, up on the cliff, there's a huge, gorgeous building, a nice church. And we were there for Eucharist at 10:30 in the morning. And the monastery kind of hugs the cliff when it's quite a
Wow.
hike up from the parking lot. And then from there, we went down the mountain and across the valley and kind of up the next hill, where, as you said, Francis wrote the final version of the rule. And we had a young Franciscan who, later on, Fabio, who was our oblate guide, said he made a serious confession. He grew up in an oblate parish, but he's a Franciscan. And,
Never too
but
late.
he gave us the history of the place,
Mhm.
And originally there was a small Benedictine monastery that was built there in the 11th century. It's still there, but then as the Franciscans settled there, they added on, and so there's the convent. It was the novitiate for a while, and the church, in the regular cloister courtyard, and then a couple of chapels, and the cave down below that you go to where Francis actually stayed, where he wrote the rule. Uh, and yeah, and then we stopped at a small, well, it wasn't small, it was actually a fairly large restaurant, but it was in the middle of nowhere, literally. We went up a goat trail, and we had lunch, and it was an exquisite lunch. Typical Italian meal with all the courses and everything, but just excellent food. Um, I think there were probably about 40 of us on that bus,
Oh,
and so it was quite a crowd at the restaurant. They had two big long tables set up, and the conversation just overflowed. It was great.
the one thing I remember from that was a few years ago visiting Assisi, the experience of being like in the Italian kind of landscape. We arrived to the to I quite often use that for the homily when Jesus talks about the fig tree and how he cursed the fig tree, all the stuff. We arrived to the parking lot, and they were olive trees, and I
Mhm.
thought, well, there's an olive tree. Being in Italy, you have to have an olive from the tree. Never ever do that. I couldn't get rid of the taste of olive like for a day because it tastes so awful. Like the olives have to be processed, right? But that's the whole
Yeah.
experience. And Fidel, did you go with Richard and Harley as well?
Yeah, sorry. First of all, my laptop was disconnected and there was no power, so that's why it went a bit off. Yeah, my experience after we went, we were together with Father Richard and then Brother Halley. Went to Gracio, just
There we
to
go.
some of the the places where Saint Francis lived.
Hmm.
So we visited those areas, and then also we had mass was on a Sunday. And then together we had meals there, and then came back. But it was a good experience, at least not seeing um, where Saint Francis lived with his other brothers. Their experience so many years ago, it was that touching. It was a very isolated
Yeah,
place, you know. But their desire to live together in those conditions in those areas. So to me, it was really appealing. I was just wondering if today it was possible to do such things.
that's
That
amazing.
on his time, he found strength,
Indeed.
from his fellows, and they tried their best to live that to have a good foundation for Franciscan life, religious life.
I certainly went with the theme of the chapter, the Pilgrims of Hope in Communion,
Yeah.
and was there any other options for the delegates to go? Like, so three of you went to the place of St. Francis. Like, if anybody could go somewhere else, was there like an other options, or every week will be one trip somewhere?
Each
Last
week would
week, that was the only option, but
Okay.
this weekend there's a possible excursion to Assisi, and some of us are headed into Rome with on an excursion called "In the Footsteps of the Mazenod."
Oh wow, that might be nice actually. And then I think like suck it all in. Like it's an opportunity to be there and walk those journeys of the Mazanot and St. Francis and everything else. The one question before we kind of wrapped up our conversation, like this whole week, there's two weeks actually, where the presentations from different regions, the Oblate Associates, the JPIC, and many others, Treasure as well. Like, is there anything from those presentations? Because we presented, well, you presented from the point of view of Canada US region, so you kind of knew what's happening in the region, getting that sense where we are as the region. But was there anything else that struck you from those presentations that you thought, wow, this is kind of something I didn't expect it, or something that I never thought about it? Was there one thing that really, after all those presentations that you saw around the world, that give you the picture of the congregation around the world? Was there anything that really struck you in those presentations?
Well, for myself, it's just I suppose the incredibly good work being done in some incredibly difficult circumstances. Uh, in Canada, we have a pretty we have a nice environment. We have a pretty safe, orderly society. There are lots of things we don't think about as we go about our ministry, but in some areas of the world, it's yeah, people are living in very poor, very desperate, and sometimes very dangerous situations. And out there with the charism of Saint Eugene, spreading the kingdom of God.
It was a very interesting conversation yesterday, and as you know, Banga and Shaniel, our communication team from Rome, they are doing daily updates at 8:30 and our time 2:30, and they talked to Ron Royheiser yesterday, and Ron precisely mentioned that like movement, like as the oblates, in order to grow to exist, the moving towards the poor, and from the perspective of the world, you can see that. Richard Fidel, what struck you in the presentations?
One of the things that really hit me this morning, Enrique Sosolo, who's the superior at the Eggs House, he did a presentation, and it was, I mean, he was funny as heck too, but he had a serious message. But in part of his message, he said, you know, there's tremendous hope. We have 601 scholastics around the world. You know, we look at our province and we say, oh, poor us, we don't have anybody in the formation. And that's true, we don't at this point. Uh, but there are young oblates, you know, and when you look at the people in the chapter, I mean, the provincial Mediterranean province is celebrating his 51st birthday today. You know, he's a baby compared to some
Oh,
of
thank
us.
you.
But, you're welcome. But you know, at home at 71, I'm one of the young guys. Here
Yeah.
at the chapter, I'm the third oldest,
Wow.
and there are, you know, only a couple more that are 70 or close to it, and then you drop down to, you know, people like Harley in early 60s, and then much younger than that. And so when
Yeah.
you look at the group, I mean, there's a tremendous sign of hope. The youth that's gathered here at the chapter.
That's one thing that you mentioned. I remember the conversation when I was talking to Louis Logan in our Vocations Cafe last time before the chapter,
Yeah.
and he mentioned precisely that about the scholastics, that this is a number that is steady for past few years. So even when the oblates are dying, or we're getting older, but the oblate of the scholastics for many years now, it's steady at that around 600 around the world, and truly gives you the picture wider than just Canada and US. It's the worldwide picture. Fidel, anything that struck you at the presentations?
Yeah, from the presentations or reports back,
Yeah.
something that came really strongly, to me that really struck my attention is, though the challenges we have now, the number of oblates, you know, diminishing, but there is that energy that will not die, will live. People are committed really to live, and then this through communion, and then also solidarity, and then also hope. So I think now all the energies and conversations towards how to sustain ourselves as a family, and how to also consolidate our effort for our missions.
It's a beautiful feeling of that congregation that you have the experience there. I want to thank you, Richard, Fidel, and Harley for taking this time and share with us your experience and give us a little update on the happening at the chapter. And I share the sentiments of Eleanor. Thanks you for sharing this, and please be assured we continue to keep you in our prayers and thoughts as we catch what we can coming out of the chapter, including morning prayer each day. I know that will be a very important week ahead of you as you are entering into the discernment of Superior General and the chancellors as well at the same time. So most likely we'll leave you alone at this for the discernment. But I hope that we can connect again after the elections and after. I think the audience with the Pope will be next Tuesday or the
The
Tuesday
third,
next.
the Monday.
So maybe we can connect with after that all the experience of the new superior general and how it's the spirit in the congregation. Then how's it going? So
Yeah.
those of you who are watching us, please stay tuned. We'll be announcing as soon as we know the time for our gathering. If you want to watch more updates from the chapter, you can switch to OMI World when they start streaming right now, the daily update at 8:30. And once again, thank you very much, Richard and Fidel, Harley, for tuning in. Please be assured of our prayers, and we'll be checking in again. Yes, Richard.
One last word. The Charles Okeo. Carlo, your brothers from the IRS say hello.
That's wonderful. Look, it's
Yeah.
small world,
Charles is
isn't it?
following us from Kenya.
It's just, I think Charles was here actually. Let me check
He
that.
was, yeah. He says, I'm happy to be following the
There he
conversation.
is. So Charles, thank you for tuning in. And we have more people watching as well
Yeah.
and appreciating what we have here. So thank you for doing this. And once again, thank you very much and enjoy your time over there. Make the best out of the experience and we keep you all in prayers. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Yerrick.
Thank you very much.